Michael Gove has named the groups considered a cause for concern under his new definition of extremism. The new definition describes it as the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance. And the named organisations will be denied access to taxpayer funding and prevented from meeting ministers and officials. Gove addressed the Commons earlier.
Organisations such as the Muslim Association of Britain, which is the British organisations to
an independent advocacy organisation,
to assess if they meet our definition of extremism and will take action as appropriate.
Well, we can talk now to Kerry Bullivant, who's from Cage International, an independent advocacy organisation and one of the named groups. Good afternoon from us, Kerry.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
What is your reaction to being on this list? Presumably you weren't particularly surprised. I think there was something up on your website even ahead of the announcement.
Well, everything's been leaked well ahead of time. But for us, this is Trojan Horse 2.0. Michael Gove was behind that Trojan Horse fiasco where it affected thousands of young children. And he's been banging on this drum about the so-called alleged Islamist plots that are all in the shadows. There's never been any proof for any of it. The extremism lies within his party and within his government. Was it our top funder that said that a sitting MP needs to be shot, coming out with blatantly racist and misogynistic comments? Was it one of our MPs that came out and said that the UK is being run by Islamists and that London and Sadiq Khan has been taken over? The extremism isn't coming from our community. It's coming from the government.
OK. Can I put to you some of the things that might raise people's eyebrows, though, about your organisation? Your director, Mohammed Rabbani, was detained in Paris last year, accused of spreading conspiracy theories about Islamophobic persecution. He was sent back to London. In 2015, your research director stated that the ISIS executioner, who came to be known as Jihadi John, was extremely gentle and kind and a beautiful young man. Now, to some people, they might see those things as being very alarming, as being a call to arms for some kind of violence and radicalisation that could harm this country.
We've never called to any violence or any call to arms. What we have done is speak out on behalf of our communities who have, unfortunately, for the last 20 years, often been at the receiving end of blunt force approaches by the government in terms of their approach to justice. We always have and always will speak out for equal justice and equal rights.
Sure, but could you just address those things specifically? I mean, people might remember the actions and deeds of Jihadi John. I mean, this was the execution of Western hostages, really violent and horrible crimes. Why would you want to be associated with anybody who described that man as doing things in the name of peace, as being gentle?
We weren't ascribing ourselves to that man. Asim was talking about the person that he'd known many years before and his interactions with him. These were the same things that were said by his teachers and by other people that knew him at that time. And our point was always, how did this change happen and how can we stop this from happening again? We were not saying that he was the same person at the same time. And these things are often, unfortunately, shortened down and misquoted in the media. But we had and we have always had the utmost respect and support for the people that were affected by him.
Okay.
We were campaigning for the release of the cab driver from Manchester, who was a non-Muslim, Alan Henning, who was called Gadget. We were working for his release.
Right. Your website promotes the slogan, "Revive Divine Justice." What does that mean?
So what that's talking about is the fact that we believe that justice should be equal for all people. Now, we believe that this is something universal and something that crosses time and place. And the necessity for equality before the law is really essential for cohesion and for communities moving forward.
Do you think, though, that in using that kind of slogan, you might call to people who perhaps don't understand exactly the nuance that you have just described?
I don't think so. I think within our community and within the people that we're calling out to, that was part of our Ramadan fundraising campaign. So during the people that we were calling out to during a holy month, that we were asking for their support so that we can support justice and equality before the law, they understood what the meaning of that was.
Okay. Did you ever receive money from the government? I mean, in being named by Michael Gove today, does it actually make very much difference to your organisation in terms of day-to-day what you do?
We have never and would never accept any money from any government, our government or any other one. We're proud of our independent status. We're accountable to our community and to all the people that support justice, that give donations to us.
So on a similar vein, does it make any difference that you would no longer be able to meet ministers or anybody representing the government?
Again, we believe in grassroots work, working with other organisations. We've been working with Black Lives Matter, with Sisters Uncut, which is the group that was set up after the murder of Sarah Everard. We believe in working with these spaces to call for justice for everybody equally. Shouldn't
you be working with a government, though, if one of your aims is for a peaceful, democratic society?
Look, unfortunately, the truth is that for the last 14 years, we've had an extremist government that have, especially led by people like Michael Gove, have cut out virtually all communication with Muslim organizations, including even the MCB. So we don't hold out hope and we don't go begging for the engagement from the government. Rather, we'd like to get on with our work regardless of if they choose to help us on that process or not.
Sure. But what if people listening to that this afternoon, Kerry, think, well, I might not be part of your community, and if you only want to live by one community's rules, then that excludes me, and that feels an aggressive move towards me.
No, we work with all sorts of organisations. As I just mentioned, Black Lives Matter and Sarah Everard organisation, Sisters Uncut, neither of those are Muslim organisations. We work with everybody that cares about justice, everybody that cares about making sure that we live in a fair and decent society. And yes, we're a Muslim organisation with an Islamic ethos, but we don't only speak to the Muslims and we don't only work within our community.
Right.
We've taken cases on of British soldiers that have been unfairly charged under the Terrorism Act.
So Michael Gove also said today that Islamism should not be confused with Islam. Islam is a great faith. Islamism is a totalitarian ideology. Would you agree with that distinction?
I think that especially with the Tory government at the moment, what we've seen is the politicisation of these terms to create a stick to beat communities with. We don't even agree to the premise behind these outlined terminologies. We're Muslims, and that's how we identify ourselves. That's how I identify myself. And if you ask me about Islamism, then this, to be honest, it's a nonsense that's been created, especially here in this case, to attack communities that are doing good work.
But again, I put to you, just if we aren't all in this together, then, what's the point of being in it at all? So if people are drawn to an organisation such as yours because they believe that within it they might find a totalitarian ideology, isn't a government that is trying to represent everybody right to point out that there might be some danger signs there?
We're not supporting any totalitarian ideology. If you want to look to who's supporting totalitarian ideologies, look to our government. Our government supports dictators across the world. They maintain good ties and sell arms to the Saudis who murdered a journalist, chopped him up into pieces in the embassy in Turkey. That's not what we're doing. So they can play these games of projection, but what we're calling for has been very, very clear. Equality and justice for all people and across the lines of any community and any group. As I said, we've been working with Black Lives Matter, with many, many other organisations, and we're not looking to be what is alleged of us.
Okay. I note also on your website it says that we will resist, and that's in response to Michael Gove's announcement today. What does that mean? How will you resist?
We'll resist by continuing our work, continuing calling for justice, and continuing calling out extremism within the Tory party. Extremism that leads to their biggest backer calling for MP to be shot, their racism and their misogyny. And I see you've done excellent research on our organisation, but you've not pointed out any racism or misogyny or calling for MPs.
We cover all kinds of stories, and Kerry, trust us, when something comes up that's in the news agenda, we will tackle it as fairly as we can. I think what our listeners would like to know from you, and therefore what we've spent the last couple of moments talking about, is actually what your organisation does, not necessarily what other organisations do. So thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. That's Kerry Bullivant, who is a representative of Cage International.